All right, Kelly, we're back on the record. Ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, the defense will have an opportunity to give an opening statement. Although the defendant does not have to present any evidence whatsoever, the state has a burden of proving each and every material element we are briefed about. Mr. Clegg, you're up to
Interesting situation you folks find yourselves in here today. Packed courtroom, TV camera, 8 lawyers, 4 on each side, jury questionnaires, individual jury questioning, a week-long jury selection process for a hindering the apprehension of a criminal, concealing facts in a political subdivision, false statement, perjury case. Obviously, there's something going on here, and Ms. Hill alluded to it. It was alluded to in the jury questionnaires last week, and it is contained in the indictment. And that there is a dead body that is tangential to this case. Rusty Sneiderman, make no mistake, was gunned down in cold blood about 9:10 in the morning on November the 18th, 2010, right after he had dropped his 2-year-old son, Ian, off at the Dunwoody Prep Daycare Center. Okay. Rusty Sneiderman was married to Mrs. Andrea Sneiderman, the defendant on trial in this particular case. There's no question whatsoever that he was gunned down. And there will be, quite frankly, no question that the individual who gunned him down was a gentleman by the name of Hemi Newman. Hemi Newman was Andrea Sneiderman's boss at General Electric. She had worked for him for approximately 7 months at the time that he gunned her down. There will be no real issue that he was wearing a fake beard when he did it. There will be no real issue that he was driving a rental van that he had rented the day before when he did it. There will be no real issue that he had taken the license plate off that particular van. And there will be no real issue that he had purchased the gun with which he committed this particular crime about 2.5 weeks earlier from a gentleman by the name of Jan De Silva, who was a parking lot attendant at the Atlanta Fish Market. There will be no real issue that Hemi Newman went to trial in this courtroom, as Ms. Hill said, back in 2002. There will be no real issue that at that trial, the issue was not whether or not Hemi Newman committed the crime. That issue was conceded in opening statement by his attorneys, but the issue at that trial was, and there's no real question about this, the issue was Hemi Newman criminally responsible for his actions at the time that he committed the act? He asserted an insanity defense when he went to trial. And in regards to the murder, there will be no real question that on November 19th, some 36 hours after her husband had been gunned down in cold blood, after the father of her 5-year-old daughter and her 2-year-old son had been gunned down in cold blood not far from their home, Andrea Sneiderman talked to the police. You will hear, ladies and gentlemen, that interview. It will not have to be summarized for you. It will not have to be described for you. You'll get to actually hear the interview yourself. And during the course of that interview, it is Andrea Sneiderman, the woman who sits here today, who is on trial for somehow impeding the investigation of the Dunwoody Police Department and presumably the DeKalb County District Attorney's Office. It was Andrea Sneiderman who first inserted the name of Hemi Newman into the investigation. And the answer, quite frankly, the statement she made will not be as Ms. Hill describes it. Quite frankly, she was asked a specific question, is there anyone who is trying to break up your family? And she immediately said, yes, my boss. There will be no equivocation. There will be no hesitation whatsoever. They then said, what's your boss's name? She said, Hemi. What's your boss's last name? She said, Newman. And then there is a brief discussion that follows. It is not the discussion as Ms. Hill would have you believe. At no point does she ever say that was a one-time thing and then that ended. Absolutely not. So keep this in mind during the course of this entire trial. Again, on November 19th, 36 hours after her husband has been gunned down in cold blood, Andrea Sneiderman gives the police the name of the guy who ultimately did it, and quite frankly, gives them the motive. Does she know at that time that Hemi Newman committed the crime? No, she does not. And quite frankly, there will be no evidence presented to you whatsoever to indicate that fact. But she is the one who first interjected his name and basically gave the police at least an idea as to somebody they could look at. Again, she didn't know, and based on the guy's personality and based on everything about him, she had no reason to believe that Hemi Newman would have committed this crime, but nonetheless, she did absolutely nothing whatsoever to impede the investigation of this case. She ain't on trial for murder, folks. Let's make sure we all understand that. You have heard the indictment read. She is not accused of actually having been present when the murder was committed. There will be no question whatsoever that Hemi Newman was alone when he committed this heinous act. There is no evidence whatsoever to show that she suggested that Hemi Newman do this, that she encouraged him, that she was aware of the fact that he had purchased the gun, that she was aware of the fact that he had purchased a fake beer, that she was aware of the fact that he had driven a rental van on the day of the crime. Quite frankly, the evidence is going to show, and I think Ms. Hill made reference to it in opening, that at some point that morning she was trying to reach Hemi Newman. There will be no evidence to show that Hemi Newman, that she knew, that Hemi Newman had tried to set up an alibi by leaving his phone back at his office at GE. She's trying to reach him. She can't reach him because Hemi Newman has thought ahead. Hemi Newman has decided, I can set up an alibi, I can deflect attention from myself. If they come asking, my cell phone will ping off the towers here near the General Electric building. I will not be a suspect. Instead, this woman is charged with 13 different crimes. You have heard them read. There is one count of hindering the apprehension of a criminal, one count of concealing facts within the political subdivision, yada, 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 4 counts of false statement, and 7 counts of perjury. Interesting thing about those counts. With one exception, in regards to count 1, the hinder and apprehension charge, in a portion of that particular count, there is an allegation that she is supposed to have deleted certain information. Other than that alleged deletion, there is not one allegation in which the state of Georgia will contend to you that Andrea Sneiderman ever committed any sort of physical act in the commission of a crime. This case is different in that regard. If you folks were here to sit on a burglary trial, for example, the allegations would include the physical act of going into a house without someone's permission. A shoplifting, the physical act of going into a store, taking something that didn't belong to you. A sexual assault, physically assaulting another individual. With that one exception, however, in this case, there is no such allegation. One other thing that is very interesting about the allegations, there are, I think, 4 counts of false statement, 7 counts of perjury, 11 actual counts where they allege that she has made a misstatement of the truth, intentionally and willfully. Listen to them, folks. During the course of the trial, keep this in mind. How many of them actually deal with a specific event, and how many of them deal with something much more subjective? There is an allegation in this case that she told the police she did not have a romantic relationship with Hemi Newman, that she was not romantically involved, is a perjury count. There is one count, remarkably enough, that makes the allegation that she lied when she said she did not return feelings for Hemi Newman. There's another count that says she lied when she said that she had not told, when she told Hemi Newman, pretty much leave me alone. There is a count that alleges that she kissed Mr. Newman back in October of 2010 at a bar in Greenville, South Carolina. There is a specific count that alleges that she shared a motel room or hotel room with him in Longmont, Colorado. And there is a statement that alleges that she denied that she had been in Longmont, Colorado with the police. Other than those 3 counts, everything else is subjective. Now let's go back to the first count, the hindering the apprehension of a criminal, because there are essentially 2 theories that the state is seeking to advance before you. One, as a result of what she did or did not do, somehow or another, the state of Georgia was hindered in their actual investigation in the case of Hemi Newman. In that particular count, the state of Georgia will contend that somehow she deleted certain particular phone information on that day, November 18th, which was relevant and germane to the murder of Rusty Sneiderman. Wait to hear that evidence. You ain't going to hear it, okay? You're not going to come close to hearing that. You will not hear who it is that deleted the information. You will not know how the information was deleted. You will have no idea when the information was deleted. You will have no idea what specifically the information is supposed to have pertained or related to. There will be so many particular gaps in that particular charge that it will be breathtaking. And what is interesting is that the state of Georgia will ask you to rely on a hunch, ask you to make a guess, ask you to make an inference to conclude that she must have been guilty. That will be, ladies and gentlemen, a consistent theme throughout the course of this case. We expect that the state of Georgia is going to ask you to draw an inference or a conclusion that she had a romantic relationship with Hemi Newman. You have heard in the state's opening statement what they expect to show in support of that. Apparently they are going to show a waitress from a bar in South Carolina who is going to say they danced and gosh, they kissed on the dance floor, and they're going to call a woman by the name of Melanie White who will relate what Hemi Newman told her. Is there going to be anything else to show she had a romantic relationship with Rusty Sneiderman, with Hemi Newman? And the answer is quite frankly no. They will suggest that you can interpret evidence in a particular way, and that when you do so, you can arrive at the conclusion that she must have been untruthful. But throughout this trial, everything you are going to hear is going to be based on inference, quite frankly, speculation, quite frankly, a hunch. There is going to be nothing in this case that will satisfy your minds beyond a reasonable doubt that this woman has done anything to impede this investigation, has ever been dishonest with either the police or the district attorney or the court system, or has done, quite frankly, anything wrong at all. It is a myth. One other thing. 13 counts in the indictment. Every one of them, every single one of them, is alleged to have happened while she was cooperating with either the police or the district attorney's office. Keep that in mind. Every single count is alleged to have occurred while she was actually cooperating with the law enforcement authorities. Now, let's talk a little bit. Obviously, one of you heard Ms. Hill's opening, and one of the things they are going to try to suggest is that Andrea Sneiderman goes to work for GE. She meets Hemi Newman, she's having trouble at home, and she all of a sudden decides, yeah, I'm tired of my husband, I'm going to get into a relationship with this guy, but then somehow or another, she blows hot, she blows cold. What's Hemi Newman to do? Let's start back when she met her husband, Rusty Sneiderman. Because make no mistake, folks, no matter what the state of Georgia will try to contend in this case, Rusty Sneiderman was the love of this woman's life. She met him when she was at Indiana University in Bloomington, Indiana. She was, I believe, a year behind him in college. They were both Jewish. They met at, I believe, the Hillel House. At that point, they struck up a relationship with one another. They started dating. They were on, off again for a while, but they became an item, and they were an item from literally her first year in college until the day that her husband was gunned down in that Dunwoody parking lot. They were inseparable. They were an item through college. Rusty graduated. Andrea graduated shortly thereafter. The couple moved to Chicago. They worked for a large consulting firm. They had not married just yet. At some point on December 30th, the year 2000, they actually got married down in West Palm Beach at a synagogue that had been founded by the grandparents of both of them. Shortly thereafter, Rusty went to Harvard Business School. Andrea moved with him from Chicago to Boston. She got a job first with a small startup firm. That firm did not make it. Shortly thereafter, she went to work for Harvard Business School Publishing. She is very adept with computers, computer information technology. She might not like me saying this, but she's a computer geek. She knows her way around advanced technology. Okay. They moved to Atlanta. At some point, Rusty works a series of jobs. Andrea continues to do contract work for Harvard Business School Publishing. They have 2 kids. One of them is named Sophia. She is born in 2005. The other is named Ian. He is born in 2008. It was Ian who Rusty had dropped off at Dunwoody Prep on the morning in question. They are living in Dunwoody. They actually, at some point, get enough funds to go ahead and buy a house out at Lake Oconee. They are enjoying their life. Rusty, in early 2010, is working for a company called Discovery Point. There will be no question whatsoever that Rusty really doesn't like working for Discovery Point. Rusty, the evidence will show, is a take charge kind of energetic individual. He is not someone who really needs to be working for someone else. He needs to be in charge of things, and he needs to have his own business. That fact apparently does not rub well with the people who run Discovery Point, and shortly into the year 2010, probably March or April, they part their ways. Rusty goes one way, Discovery Point goes the other. He is out of a job. He and his wife, Andrea, realize he's not meant to work for someone else. He needs his own business. Andrea knows that he is an entrepreneur and is, quite frankly, going to support him unconditionally in his desire to have his own business. We expect the evidence will show that in November of 2010, when Rusty is shot and killed, he is actively involved in trying to start up his own business, something called Star Voicemail. We don't need to go into a great deal of detail as to what that is, but he actually had a luncheon meeting with a potential investor later that day. Somewhere in the neighborhood of 11:15, 11:30, he was supposed to get together with his business partner and another individual. Andrea had been helping him all along. She was completely and totally supportive of what he was trying to do. One way that Andrea was supportive of what he was trying to do was not to make him go back into the corporate arena and find a job working for someone else. Here's the deal. Andrea tells Rusty, you start your business. You're going to succeed. You're going to do what we want you to do. I will go back to work because, quite frankly, her work with Harvard Business Publishing was winding down at that time. I will go back to work. I'll see if I can find a job in the corporate world myself. At that time, in February of 2010, expecting that Rusty's job future at Discovery Point is coming to an end, she goes ahead and sends out some resumes, one of whom goes out to a woman by the name of Relly Newman. Relly Newman is a member of a book club of an individual, and another member of the book club has a connection to Andrea. Okay. The resume gets to Relly Newman. Relly Newman is not employed at the time. Relly Newman gives the resume to her husband, Hemi Newman, and ultimately Andrea winds up working for General Electric. She starts sometime in April of 2010. It is, quite frankly, a stressful beginning. She is a computer geek. Most of the people she's working with are engineers. She needs a lot of help, and she needs it frequently. There will be no question that there was significant contact by either phone, email, or text between she and Hemi Newman. One of the things that you will have to understand in this case is while Newman was in fact her mentor, Ms. Hill was correct in that regard, Newman's building was here, Andrea's building was here. She couldn't simply walk down the hall. If she wanted to talk to him, she either had to go from one building to another or communicate electronically. That's what she did. You will hear numbers bandied about during the course of this trial as to the extent of the communication between the two of them. Most of that communication had to do with matters related specifically to her job. Now, did she travel? Sure she did. She went to a number of locations. She went to Melbourne, Florida. She went to Norfolk, Virginia. She went to Minden, Nevada, which I believe is just outside of Reno. She went to Longmont, Colorado. She went to Greenville, South Carolina. She went to London, England, and Scotland, and then she went back to Greenville. Newman came on those trips. Understand this. Andrea was required as a condition of her employment to go to these various locations because what she was trying to do needed input from General Electric employees at those locations. Newman had had a performance evaluation earlier in 2010 and had been told by his supervisors, get out of the office more. People don't know who you are. Get out, mingle with the people you actually come into contact with. He did. Now, at some point, did Hemi Newman develop an infatuation with the woman who sits here in this courtroom here today? Boy, did he ever. We are not going to deny that or contend otherwise. But what the state will describe as a romantic relationship, a romantic involvement, is quite frankly nothing of the sort. What it is a guy who is moonstruck, who is like a teenager in love, and who is head over and heels in love with this woman who finds herself in the darndest predicament. I want my husband to have a business. I want to support the family in the interim while he gets that business up and running. I don't want to jeopardize my future at GE. And quite frankly, she liked working at GE. It was good work. There were intelligent people. She actually liked Hemi Newman. Despite the advances the man made, he was not assertive, he was not aggressive, he was not mean-spirited. There was nothing about him that would have caused her any concern as to her personal safety. She could simply say, Hemi, get a grip, it ain't gonna happen. And he would tuck his little tail between his legs and go about his business. But he was persistent and he kept coming back. There will be no doubt. There will be, as the state has alluded to, a series of emails that you will hear in this case. You will look for evidence of affection from one party to the other. There is going to be evidence that Hemi Newman basically told this woman that he was in love with her, that at some point he wanted to marry her, that he was thinking of her constantly, that he was doing this, that he was doing that. Look for the evidence in those emails, in the reciprocated, in the return emails, where Andrea Sneiderman displays any sort of affection for Hemi Newman. You ain't gonna hear it, folks. It is a one-way street. She is trying to handle the situation as best she can without jeopardizing her job at GE. She has been there for a short period of time. She actually talked to a friend or two and said, what do I do? Got some advice. Just handle it as best you can. Don't go to human resources. Bottom line is, she's trying to handle a difficult situation. Now, again, Newman is not a threat. Let's understand the Hemi Newman that Andrea Sneiderman perceived back in the summer and early fall of 2010. He was 47 years old. He was married and had 3 kids. He was an upper mid-level manager at General Electric, a blue-chip company, perhaps the blue-chip company. He had no history of any sort of documented violence whatsoever. He was not perceived as a threat, and he had a master's degree from Georgia Tech in aerospace engineering. We expect the state of Georgia will call certain folks from General Electric for whatever purpose. Listen to what they got to say about their perceptions of Hemi Newman back before they knew he was capable of murder. Nobody had any reason to believe that he could possibly be a threat. You will hear from Melanie White. Melanie White was the woman that the state will contend Hemi Newman confided in during the course of 2010 when he told her about his alleged relationship. You will hear her. You will hear someone ask her, did you believe Hemi Newman was capable of any sort of criminal act? She will say, Hemi Newman, you gotta be kidding me. The bottom line is, Hemi Newman was a pest. Hemi Newman was a nuisance. Hemi Newman, to this woman, was not a threat. Were there situations, were there times when things with her husband weren't as good as they might have been? I'll be blunt with you. Yeah, but it was no big deal. Here's what's going on. Up until March, April of 2010, they have a fairly traditional family. It is Rusty who gets up and goes off to work every day. It is Andrea who does contract work from home, but is primarily responsible for the kids. It is Andrea's responsibility to get Sophia to school. It is Andrea's responsibility to get Ian wherever he has to go. It is her responsibility to be the primary caretaker. That flips on its side come April. All of a sudden, Andrea is the one who's going to work. We expect the evidence will show that Andrea actually, when she took the job with GE, inquired as to the flexibility of the schedule that she could maintain so she could continue with her responsibilities. She was promised one thing, she wound up experiencing another. She was working more than she thought she was going to have to, and as a result, Rusty was left with increased responsibility for the kids. Remember, at the time, they're 5, they're 2. That's not an easy transition. During that particular period of time, I think both of them resented the fact that, why don't you do more with the kids, vice versa. The bottom line is, I think each of them thought the other wasn't doing enough. The bottom line is, each was doing too much themselves. They resolved, you know what they did? They got a nanny. They'd had a nanny before, and in October, November of 2010, they decided the easiest way to resolve this situation and give ourselves both some breathing room is to get a nanny. The nanny was not full-time. She would work a couple hours a week. You'll hear from her. That alleviated the stress in the family quite a bit. Now, there was stress, but was there ever any point where this woman ever contemplated leaving her husband and leaving her kids behind? And the answer will be an emphatic no. She was happily married to the love of her life, and there will ultimately be no dispute of that fact. November of 2010. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on between Andrea and her husband, Rusty, and her family. She actually shows up at Vanderlyn Elementary School one day to be a, in fact, I actually have a chart. And I will be honest with you folks, old dog, new tricks. It pains me to use this chart, but be that as it may. November the 5th, she shows up at Vanderlyn Elementary to be a science parent. Her daughter saw what they were discussing, who can say. The next day, she, Rusty, the kids play softball to benefit cystic fibrosis research. They have very good friends who had a family member who had suffered from that disease, and they are actively involved in that particular charity. The next day, they fly up to Washington, D.C. They are there for Rusty's grandmother's 95th birthday. They go on a cruise together, November 11th through November 15th. It is the two of them. They are there without their kids. You will hear from a woman by the name of Diane Trump. She came into contact with the Sneidermans along with her husband during the course of the trip. She will describe their interaction and relationship to one another. You will hear that, quite frankly, from any number of folks. They were well suited and well matched. Shortly thereafter, they have other plans. Andrea is going to go to Boston on November 22nd. The murder took place on a Thursday. She's planning to go up there on a Monday. She's going to try to continue or start back up her contract work with Harvard Business School Publishing. The grandparents, Rusty's parents, are coming down for Thanksgiving. We expect the evidence to show that Rusty's going to go to Los Angeles sometime in December. We expect the evidence that everybody is going to go. When I say everybody, Andrea, Rusty, the kids, the grandparents, the Sneidermans, to Disney World in March of 2011. Make no mistake, in November of 2010, there were plans that this family had made well in advance of the date of the murder. The state will have you believe that she somehow knew of the murder. Keep in mind, during the course of this trial, what it is that they were planning beyond that date. They were going to go bowling with another couple on the 19th. You will hear it, folks. There is nothing out of the ordinary that they were expecting to happen. They had a happy, hectic life. They were enjoying each other. They were enjoying these kids. And it all came crashing down on November the 18th. It all came crashing down because Hemi Newman came to the realization that that woman, no matter what his desire, was never going to be his. So you got a fake beard, got a gun, got a rental vehicle, and drove to Dunwoody Prep where he stalked Rusty Sneiderman and gunned him down minutes after he had taken his 2-year-old son into the preschool. The state contends that Andrea basically did everything she could at that point to minimize any contact she had, relationship she had, anything with Hemi Newman, and that in the course of doing so, she basically made it difficult for the state of Georgia to prosecute this particular case. Hogwash. What you're going to hear, first off, is you're going to hear that Andrea does in fact get a phone call that morning from a woman by the name of Donna Formato at Dunwoody Prep, that she tells her, you got to come now. There is a sense of urgency in her voice. It's not aimed. The only reasonable inference is it's Rusty. Donna Formato will not remember whether she said something that happened to Rusty or not, but it was clearly Rusty that was requiring a sense of urgency. She gets in her car. She drives like a bat out of hell to Dunwoody Prep. She calls her father-in-law. She calls her mother, her father, her brother. She talks to all of them. She doesn't tell her mom Rusty's been shot. She doesn't tell her dad Rusty has been shot. She doesn't tell her brother Rusty has been shot. The state would have you believe that she tells Don Sneiderman that Rusty has been shot prior to that information having been communicated to her. Listen carefully to the testimony of Don Sneiderman, because the first time Don Sneiderman makes any reference to that particular conversation is May the 25th of 2011. 6 months and 7 days after the fact of that particular conversation, Don Sneiderman all of a sudden has this specific recollection where he recalls this conversation. Listen to the circumstances under which he recalled it. Listen to the people that he talked to at Dunwoody Prep. Examine what he did on that particular morning, and you will realize he is simply mistaken. You will see the video of Andrea getting out of the car when she arrives at Dunwoody Prep. Ms. Hill's actions in this courtroom demonstrated perhaps that she was acting. You'll see it, folks. You won't have anybody to interpret it for you. She wasn't acting. The woman was an emotional basket case. At Dunwoody Prep, it becomes abundantly clear to everyone what has happened. Her parents arrive at Dunwoody Prep. Her dad and her brother see Rusty's car. It is surrounded by crime scene tape. Rusty's body has been moved. There is no discernible damage to the car, and there is blood on the ground. Detective Cordolino from Dunwoody Police Department is there. There will be no doubt, really, that Andrea was told at that time Rusty was shot. Does she have a specific recollection of it? No, she doesn't. Can she tell you exactly what she did in what sequence on that particular morning? No, she cannot. She is traumatized and shocked beyond her wildest dreams. Her life has been turned topsy-turvy in a matter of one single phone call. But the bottom line is, she did her damnedest to cooperate with the police and do everything that she was supposed to do. That's it, folks. Now, Ms. Hill said something about prior to going to the hospital, she went home and changed her clothes. Nobody told her at Dunwoody Prep, not the police nor anyone else, where her husband had been sent. His body was gone at that point. He had been stuck into an ambulance and driven somewhere, and nobody knew. The police told her to go home. She did so. When they got home, her dad actually picked up the phone and started making calls. They found out that he was at Atlanta Medical Center. They got in their car. They went there with dispatch. There will be no disputing that particular fact. She goes there. She is advised that her husband is dead. She literally falls to the ground, and then her world changes completely and totally. The next day, the Dunwoody police show up. Detective Thompson, Sergeant Cordolino. They take a tape statement from her. The tape statement runs about an hour and 25 minutes. You will hear, as I told you earlier, the relevant portions of that particular conversation. She does not simply say, oh, he made a pass at me one time and I told him to go about his business. You'll hear it. You'll hear exactly what she said. She interjected, like I said, his name, and she interjected the motive. Could she provide actual proof that he had committed the crime? Of course not. What else did she do? We have another chart. The police, by the way, there are eyewitnesses to the shooting. And the police come up with a sketch. There's actually 3 sketches that are created. One of the sketches is deemed, for whatever reason, to be the most reliable, and it is passed out to numerous folks. Literally, at the time of Rusty's funeral, which was on Sunday, there are people at her request passing out the sketch of the person who ultimately turns out to be Hemi Newman. You will hear about her behavior at the funeral. She literally almost falls into the ground when the casket is about to be lowered. But at the same time, the woman who is apparently trying to conceal from the police the fact that Hemi Newman killed her husband is passing out the sketch, or is having had passed out on her behalf, the sketch of the killer at the very funeral for the man whose life was taken. She allows the police at that same time to come into her house and search her house. On the 19th, they allowed Rusty's computer to be turned over to the Dunwoody police. On the 22nd, she's asking friends again to redistribute the sketch. On the 24th, she goes back and meets with the cops again. This is a 3.5-hour long interview. She talks at length about Hemi Newman. She describes the trips that she took with Hemi Newman. She describes her relationship with Hemi Newman. She says that she likes the guy. She says she does not say that he was her lover. He was not. Following day, she allows the police to search her lake house out near Lake Oconee. She doesn't go there with them. She just says, contact this guy. He'll let you into the house. She assists in getting reward money generated so that the suspect can be developed. During this time, she's also talking to security companies, trying to up her security because she has no idea whether or not the person who did this might come after she and her kids. She winds up at some point not getting much help from the Dunwoody Police Department, who are essentially uncommunicative with her. She actually calls up a friend who works at the GBI, the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and says to that friend, can you guys help? I'm not sure Dunwoody knows what they're doing. GBI person says, no, we don't get invited, we don't get involved unless we're invited. They don't, but that's the bottom line. She continues to make efforts to attempt to develop the identity of the killer, and then on December 28th, she is down in Palm Beach, Florida. And this is sad, folks. She and her family have gone down there. December 30th would have been the 10th anniversary of her wedding to Rusty Sneiderman. She is down there. The evidence is going to show that on December 30th, she actually put on her wedding dress and went to the synagogue where she got married, hoping to feel Rusty's spirit and presence. But 2 days before that, lo and behold, here comes Hemi Newman. Now, one thing that will be interesting in this case, ladies and gentlemen, is the lack of communication between Andrea Sneiderman and Hemi Newman after November the 18th. She tried to call him on the morning of the 18th. You know why? It's her boss. I'm left work. I just bolted like a bat out of hell out of my office, and I don't know when I'm coming back. She can't reach him. She ultimately gets in touch with another individual by the name of Alan Shackley to say, I'm trying to get in touch with Hemi. Something's happened. You need to convey to him that I'm not coming back to work. There is nothing more suspicious than that. He is her boss. She needs to tell him what's going on. We expect the evidence will show that at some point, Hemi actually sent her a text or email saying, I said a prayer on Rusty's behalf at the GE holiday party, and her response was, I think you can agree we deserve to have a break. And her response is, the only thing the world deserves is for Rusty to be back. Hemi communicates again, and she responds, your words aren't helping. Please leave me alone. This is the guy she's had an affair with, a romantic relationship with, a romantic involvement with. This is the guy she's covering up for. This is the guy she's impeding the investigation of. On the 28th, down in Palm Beach, she gets an email from Henry Newman. It is affectionate towards her. It includes, as an attachment, a song from a popular singer by the name of Bruno Mars. She does not open the song, but she goes, "What on earth is this?" And at some point she thinks, nah, it couldn't be. Could it? Could it really be Hemi Newman? The mild-mannered guy I know. I know he's got an infatuation with me. I know he's got a thing for me, but he's got a master's degree. He's working in corporate America. It can't be. But you know, the more I look at this sketch, yeah, maybe so. January 4th, she goes on her own to the Dunwoody Police Department when she's back in town. And she calls the meeting. They're not asking her to come down, she's going down. And she goes down and she talks to the police, including the chief of police, and says, "What's going on with the investigation? Have you looked at him?" They have. December 15th, they run his record, some sort of record. December 21st, they run some other sort of record on him, the Georgia Department of Labor. They are tracking the guy down. And this is good stuff. You'll actually enjoy this. The Dunwoody police had surveillance video from Dunwoody Prep. They know, according to the description, that it's a silver van, but they don't really know what kind of silver van. As you know, silver vans are relatively ubiquitous these days. But they look at the video footage, they get it enhanced, and they start to figure out it's a 2011 Kia Sedona. Does that narrow in on Hemi Newman? Well, that's the precise kind of vehicle that Hemi Newman had rented. But they don't know that at the time. But another good piece of police work, there is a barcode on the windshield of the car. That barcode is indicative of the fact that it is a rental car. So they start focusing on rental cars, and lo and behold, who rented such a vehicle the day before the homicide and returned it later, sometime after the death of Rusty Sneiderman, on the date of the homicide, other than Hemi Newman? They don't convey this information to Andrea Sneiderman. So when Andrea Sneiderman is meeting with them on January the 4th, she's asking, "Have you looked at Hemi Newman?" She does not exclusively focus on him, but she's asking them, "Have you done this?" This is the woman, understand, who is impeding their investigation into the identity of the actual killer. Little does she know that while she is doing that, Cordellino and another individual are questioning Hemi Newman for 5 hours in an interview room in the very same building. The next day, that night, after they've arrested Hemi Newman, they come to her, they tell her what's happened. You will hear the tape of the actual ungodly sound that she lets out when she realizes that her boss has killed her husband. And then the next day she goes back and subjects herself to yet one more lengthy interview with the Dunwoody police. She cooperates time after time after time. And because she does, she finds herself seated here today on trial for these allegations. Does she continue to cooperate? Boy, does she ever. It's the case of the state of Georgia versus Hemi Newman. The case is going to trial. What do we know? Who's the state's first witness? I think we'll call Andrea Sneiderman. Andrea, do you know Hemi Newman? Boy, do I ever. She's sitting in court facing her husband's killer. And again, the issue is not whether he did it, but whether he was insane at the time that he did. You work with the guy for 7 months. Did you notice any sort of symptom or indication that he was mentally ill? Absolutely not. She is cooperating yet again. During the course of that testimony, all of a sudden the assistant district attorney who is doing the questioning, none of these fine folks here, all of a sudden turns on her and says, "You were having an affair with him." She was not, and she does not react well. She is feisty, she is strong-willed, and she will not be pushed around. You will see on the video footage of her when she testifies. You may not like the degree of feistiness that she demonstrates. But the bottom line is, she ain't going to take it lying down. The bottom line is, she was not the one who had an infatuation with someone else. She was the one who was trying to keep it together for her family and trying to do the right thing. And as a result, her husband wound up dead. Not because of anything she did. She didn't hide it. She didn't conceal it. She didn't know about it in advance. She didn't try to keep the cops from finding out. She did not try to deny the relationship. She gave them his name. She gave the motive. And she has cooperated time and time and time and time again. Now here we sit. Let's see whether or not she impeded the investigation and tried to prevent the truth from coming out. You're going to hear it, folks. You decide. There was no romance. There was not much of anything. This was a woman who was victimized by Hemi Newman, and darned right now she isn't being victimized by the system. Pay close attention. There are going to be a lot of details in this case. There's going to be a lot of information thrown at you. I'm glad to see virtually every one of you has a notepad. Use it during the course of this trial. But the bottom line is, when you get to the conclusion, you will realize that she has done nothing wrong. She is not a criminal. She has not lied to the police. Your only appropriate verdict at that time will be one of not guilty on each and every count. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, at this point in time, both the state and defense have concluded their opening statements. I'm going to give you a 10-minute stretch break with assistant by deputy in the jury room, and then when we resume, we will actually start with witnesses. All right, it'll be 10 minutes, Mr. Deputy.
All right. Good to see you.
Welcome back to 11 Alive's coverage of the Andrea Sneiderman trial. I'm Jeff Hullinger along with attorney Paige Pate, and we have just heard the prosecution's opening statement as well as the defense. Some different styles, certainly some different themes that were the centerpiece for both of these protracted speeches of about 50 minutes.